Hello, grammarians, and welcome to today's screencast on nouns. So far, we've talked about the complete sentence and how, in order to have a complete sentence, one has to have a subject, a predicate, and a complete thought. And we've talked about how typically the subject of your sentence is a noun or a pronoun. So today's screencast is meant to give you a deeper understanding of the role of nouns, so that you can have an easier time finding the subject of a sentence and, as a writer, crafting well-written, sophisticated sentences. Okay, as a quick recap, remember a noun is a person, place, thing, idea, or emotion. And a last bit of recap, nouns can be concrete or abstract, meaning a concrete noun is something that you can touch, a kitty, a puppy, spaghetti and meatballs, versus an abstract noun. Also a noun, but those are ideas that you can't touch. Things like democracy or realism, idealism, love, hate. Those are concepts, they're ideas, they're emotions, but you can't hold them in your hand. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, it matters because if you know that some nouns can't be touched, that's going to help you to identify abstract nouns when they're serving as subjects in your sentences. Things like idealism. So let's look at some examples. An example would be something like, idealism will save you from the perils of pessimism. So idealism here is the subject of the sentence. It's a noun, but it's abstract. You can't really touch it. The next example is love is an emotion that everyone should feel. Love is our subject. You can't touch it. It is an abstract noun. And then finally, democracy prevents abuses of power. Democracy here is the subject of our sentence. It is a noun, but again, you cannot touch it. Now, I did a clever thing in these examples. I also used additional nouns that are abstract nouns that are not necessarily the subject of the sentence, because remember, nouns can serve multiple jobs inside of the sentence. The noun that the sentence is mainly about is the subject of your sentence, but you can have lots of other nouns in a sentence. So if we go back to the idealism sentence, idealism will save you from the perils of pessimism. Peril is, in this case, a noun, and so is pessimism, and they are both abstract nouns. If you go to the second example, emotion is another example of an abstract noun. And then if you go to the last example, abuses is also an abstract noun, and so is power. So you've got tons of examples of abstract nouns here, some of which are serving as the subject of your sentence, and some of which are just sitting quietly in the sentence serving other jobs. Another type of noun that you should be aware of are count and non-count nouns. So count nouns are simply nouns that you can count. So in this case, this type of noun can be singular or plural. For example, you can have a rock or a lot of rocks, a box or a lot of boxes, or a foot or many feet. That is contrary to a non-count nouns. Those are nouns that you cannot count. For example, sand. One can assume you cannot count sand. It just is. In the same way that you can't count sugar or happiness. It just is. Now, non-count nouns, things that can't be counted, can only be singular. And the reason that this slide matters is that when you are writing a sentence, you have to maintain subject-verb agreement. In other words, if you have a plural noun, which would be a count noun, then your predicate needs also to be plural. And I give you a couple of examples. The trees were tall. So trees is a plural count noun, and so it needs a plural predicate, were. The next sentence, the shrub was tiny. Shrub there, also a count noun, is a singular count noun, so it takes a singular verb form. And in this case, that's the word was. The shrub was tiny. So you'll need to be aware of your subject and predicate agreement. So you just need to understand if you're using a noun that is plural, you're going to have to pair it with a plural predicate. There's another concept that matters with regard to count nouns and non-count nouns, and that's the adjectives fewer and less. Count nouns use the adjective fewer, whereas non-count nouns use the adjective less. And I give you an example. Fewer people were coming to dinner, so the chef put out less sugar. So people is a count noun. You can count number of people. So if you're saying there were going to be less people, less numbers of people, you're going to use the word fewer people. So then if you're putting out a smaller amount of sugar, you're going to use the word less, not fewer. He doesn't put out fewer sugar, he puts out less sugar. So just so that you know, and there are a couple of other sophisticated concepts around count and non-count nouns. And so if you'll notice, I have linked the count nouns to this Walden University grammatical guide on count nouns. So there's actually way more that you can look at. If you just scroll, you can see there is tons of information out there on count and non-count nouns. So again, that's linked here, and you can make use of that however you see fit. The next category of nouns we're going to talk about are collective nouns. These are nouns that name an entire group or collection of people or things. So collective nouns always look singular. But you as the writer are going to need to choose whether they are serving as singular or plural, depending on the way you're trying to work it into a sentence. So here are some examples of collective nouns: army, a cast, a choir, a class, a faculty. Now, why does this matter? Because if the collective noun is all doing the same thing, then you're going to consider it singular and you're going to write it singular. And the reason that matters is because, again, this is a subject predicate agreement issue. So if you use a collective noun in the singular, you'll need to choose the singular form of whatever verb you're trying to use. Conversely, if the collective noun is each doing its own thing, every member of that collective noun is doing something different, then you write it in a sentence as if it were plural. And here are a couple of examples. The faculty is going to graduation. In this case, the entire faculty are behaving as a singular, single-minded group. They are all doing one same thing, which is to go to graduation. So in that case, you treat faculty as a singular noun. And so you use the singular form of to be, which is. The faculty is going. On the other hand, if you say the faculty are teaching their classes, in that case, every member of the faculty is behaving as an individual. And so together you have a plural group of individuals doing their own thing. So in that case, you use the word faculty as a plural. And so in that case, you use the plural form of to be, which is are. So you say the faculty are teaching their classes. So you can see you as the writer have to be in control of what you mean by that collective noun. And so then you would make a decision about whether you're going to use a singular form of the verb or a plural form of the verb. Okay, the final type of nouns that we're going to talk about today are common and proper nouns. We'll start with common nouns. Common nouns are a non-specific class of people, places, things, ideas, or emotions. And as a result of their being non-specific, they are not capitalized unless they're going to start a sentence or be in a title somewhere. Here are some examples of some common nouns: a building, a car, a book, an aunt, or a president. Now, why does this matter? Because good writers know when to capitalize and when not to capitalize. So be careful about what kind of noun you are using and whether or not you will need to capitalize it as a writer. All right, let's juxtapose that with proper nouns. Proper nouns name a specific class of people, places, things, ideas, or emotions, and therefore they are always capitalized. And a quick note about italicizing versus using quotation marks. Those rules are going to apply to these proper nouns. In case you didn't know, I have created for you a lovely table that distinguishes the difference between when to italicize a title versus when to put a title in quotation marks. So you will italicize titles of large items like a book, an album, or a newspaper. That's a big group or collection of things. And then inside of those collections are smaller chunks of things, and that's what you would put quotation marks around. For example, if you have a book title, that will be in italics, and its chapter titles will be in quotation marks. If you have your favorite album, your album title is going to be italicized, and the songs that occur on that album will be in quotation marks. You have a giant newspaper, its title gets italicized versus a newspaper article inside of that giant newspaper, that will get quotation marks. So you can take a look at these examples. For example, Treasure Island is the name of a book, and What I Heard in the Apple Barrel is the title of Chapter 11 inside of Treasure Island. Dark Side of the Moon, arguably Pink Floyd's best album, contains the song Money, which you would put in quotation marks. The New York Times is a big newspaper. It gets italicized. The title of an article inside of the New York Times, like A Mysterious Infection Spanning the Globe in a Climate of Secrecy, that would get quotation marks. Now, let me talk to you for a hot minute about italicizing versus underlining. Italicizing is the standard if you are on a computer. If you are handwriting and you cannot italicize in handwriting, that's when you will choose to underline. So here are some examples of proper nouns. A common noun is a building, but if you are naming a specific building, like the Empire State Building, you're going to capitalize Empire State Building. A normal car, she drove her car to the store, no capitalizing. She drove her Ferrari to the store, that gets a capital. If you're reading any general book, then you're just reading a book, no capital. But if you are reading The Great Gatsby, then you are capitalizing The Great Gatsby. If you're talking about your favorite aunt, my favorite aunt sent me to college, then that's just a general non-specific noun. But if you say my Aunt Rachel sent me to college, then you capitalize aunt and you capitalize Rachel because that is her title and then that is her name. For president, if you say the president of a company makes a lot of money, that's just a general president, no capitalization. But if you're saying President John F. Kennedy ushered in a new era of civil rights, then president gets capitalized because it is his title. Here are some examples where I want you to please look through each sentence and capitalize any proper nouns that you see in each of these sentences. Just add these to your notes and we'll go over them in class. And that's it for nouns. Thanks, everybody.